Chapter 1: The Cold Dinner. They called it dinner. I called it humiliation served cold. While they laughed over steak, I got leftovers and a lesson. They thought I was just the quiet girlfriend, the one who'd smile and swallow it. But I'm a forensic accountant. I read numbers for a living. And the night they tried to serve me scraps, I found receipts worth millions in their own kitchen drawer. 3 months later, those receipts were Exhibit A. They wanted me to know my place. I did on the witness stand. When Ethan told me his parents wanted to meet me, I laughed. We'd been dating for a year, living together for 6 months, and I'd seen enough of his mother's filtered social posts to know she didn't exactly welcome outsiders. Ethan brushed my worries aside the way he always did. "It'll be fine, Em," he said, that gentle smile softening every sharp edge. "They're just traditional." Traditional. That should have been my first red flag. The Hathaway estate sat on 3 acres outside Boston, wrapped in white pillars and hedges so precisely trimmed they looked measured with a ruler. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and money, the kind that never needed to introduce itself. Diane Hathaway, Ethan's mother, met us at the door. Her smile was perfect, expensive dental work perfect, but it didn't reach her eyes. "So, you're the accountant," she said, tone polite, curious, and just a shade condescending. "How practical." Her husband Robert extended a handshake firm enough to be a test. "Hope you're hungry. Diane's prepared something special tonight." Ethan squeezed my hand under the table as we sat down, like a silent promise that everything would be okay. What she meant by special turned out to be steak dinners for everyone and a plastic container of cold leftovers quietly placed in front of me. For a second, I thought there'd been a mistake. "Oh," Diane said, voice light and pleasant, the way one might explain a trivial oversight. "We didn't realize Ethan would bring you at the last minute. I'm sure you don't mind. There's plenty of salad." Ethan's fork froze midair. "Mom." "It's fine," I cut in quickly, forcing a smile. "I actually prefer light meals." Across from me, his sister Chloe smirked. "So disciplined. You must save a lot cooking like that. Ethan told us you're frugal." The air smelled of wine and quiet contempt. Ethan's silence cut deeper than their words. I took a slow sip of water, keeping my expression calm. "I call it budgeting," I said softly. "It's what I do for a living." Robert chuckled without looking up from his plate. "Well, that's one way to put it." They laughed, the kind of low-polished laughter meant to sound harmless, but never is. I kept my tone, even my posture, straight. Years of client meetings and audits had taught me that silence used correctly could be its own form of power. Still, I could feel my cheeks warming under their gaze, not from shame but restraint. They talked about luxury renovations, vineyard trips, art auctions, conversations full of names and prices instead of feelings. I listened quietly, nodding at the right moments, the polite stranger in their curated world. Diane lifted her glass diamonds glittering under the chandelier. "To family," she said, "and knowing one's place in it." I raised my own glass, smiled faintly, and took a sip. The wine burned like swallowed laughter. Inside, something colder settled in. When the meal ended, I offered to help with the dishes, not out of obligation, but to move to breathe. Diane's eyebrows lifted a fraction, as though help was a word she'd only heard in theory. "Really, dear, that's not necessary," she said, but didn't stop me. The kitchen was spotless, almost sterile. As I reached for a towel, I opened the wrong drawer and froze. Inside was a neat stack of envelopes and receipts. Not grocery slips or bills, but invoices, thick official ones with embossed letterheads, subcontractor payments, equipment purchases, amounts too large, too irregular, Hathaway Group landscaping services. But the routing number didn't match the company's code. I knew it instantly. I handle other people's money for a living. Maybe that's why I notice where it goes missing. The details swam before my eyes like the first line of a confession. Vendor transfer, CNH Logistics, expense allocation phase 3 reclass. The kind of jargon people use to hide theft in plain sight. I felt my pulse quicken, not fear, but calculation. I pulled my phone from my purse and with a practiced flick took 3 photos. Quiet, fast, untraceable. Looking for something, Diane's voice came from the doorway, silk wrapped around steel. I closed the drawer smoothly. Just a towel. I didn't want to drip water on your floor. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. No need to tidy up, dear. The help comes in this morning. Of course, I said, matching her tone perfectly. Wouldn't want to get in the way. Ethan appeared behind her, balancing dessert plates. Everything okay? Perfect, Diane said brightly. Emma was just exploring. He laughed uneasily. You two are getting along already. I smiled. We understand each other just fine. As the night dragged on, the conversation floated between polite jabs and expensive anecdotes. Chloe bragged about her consulting work, which sounded suspiciously vague. Robert asked about my family, and when I mentioned growing up middle class in Worcester, his smile stiffened. So you worked your way up, he said. Every inch, I replied. The silence that followed felt like judgment, but it only confirmed what I'd already suspected: they valued pedigree, not persistence. When dessert ended, I excused myself. Ethan walked me to the door, his hand resting lightly on my back. They'll warm up to you, he said, trying to sound confident. I'm sure they will. I lied, buttoning my coat. I mean it, Em. My mom's just protective. You know how families can be. I hesitated, searching his face for something: apology, awareness, anything. But all I found was the same soft denial that had always been there. Sure, I said, quietly. Outside, the air was sharp with winter. I drove home through streets glazed with frost, headlights cutting through the dark like small truths in a long lie. Halfway there, my phone buzzed a text from Ethan. Sorry about dinner. I'll talk to them. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back, Don't. It's fine. It wasn't fine. But explaining humiliation to someone who didn't notice it never is. When I reached my apartment, I slipped off my shoes and sat at the kitchen table, phone beside me, mind still replaying every detail: the plates, the laughter, the drawer. Numbers moved through my head like ghosts. The account codes I'd glimpsed, 45219, 876B, burned there like coordinates waiting to be followed. I opened my laptop, pulled up the public registry, and typed Hathaway Group, construction firm, municipal contracts, tax exempt for charitable development. Charitable. Of course. The irony almost made me laugh. I scrolled through their filings, my fingers trembling slightly, part adrenaline, part disbelief. Nothing blatant. They'd been careful. Too careful. But I knew what to look for. Missing links, duplicated transactions, buried transfers disguised as goodwill. Every family has its secrets. I just happened to find theirs in a drawer. I closed my laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere between the chandelier and the cold leftovers, I had crossed an invisible line from guest to witness. The taste of silence stayed longer than the food itself. I thought of Ethan's quiet, nervous smile, his mother's perfect posture, his sister's smirk. They'd tried to make me feel small. They forgot I measure value differently. So I poured myself a glass of water, let it wash down the bitterness, and whispered, half to the empty room, half to myself. They served me cold food to make me feel small. They forgot I measure value differently. And as the city hummed outside my window, I realized the dinner had ended hours ago, but the audit had already begun. Chapter 2. The numbers that didn't add up. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the numbers. 45219, 876B. Vendor transfers that didn't exist anywhere on the legitimate balance sheets. They pulsed behind my eyelids like a heartbeat I couldn't turn off. People think accounting is about math. It isn't. It's about truth and the way liars try to disguise it. I handle other people's money for a living. Maybe that's why I notice when it starts to disappear. By Monday morning, I was at my desk early, the first one in the office. The city was still gray outside, half awake, and my coffee had gone cold before I realized I hadn't taken a single sip. I kept staring at the empty cell of a spreadsheet, trying to make myself work on my real assignments. But the dinner, the laughter, that single drawer, it wouldn't leave me alone. At lunch, I finally gave in. I logged into the state's public registry. It was something I did for clients all the time: verify licenses, vendor history, charitable filings. This time, the search box felt heavier. I typed Hathaway Group, Massachusetts, and hit enter. There it was, a mid-sized construction firm, family-owned, founded in 1978. Contracts with local municipalities, a community development division with tax-exempt status for charitable renovation projects. Charitable. That word again. I clicked through the filings, scrolling past glossy statements until my cursor stopped on a line item for donations in kind. The numbers were small enough to look harmless, which was exactly what made them suspicious. A donation is supposed to subtract from your profit. Theirs did the opposite. That's when I felt it, that quiet electric pull in my stomach I always got before uncovering something wrong. Some people chase adrenaline through risk. I chase it through accuracy. That evening when Ethan came home from work, I tried to sound normal. Long day. He shrugged, loosening his tie. Dad's been stressed about a project bid. Chloe's helping with payroll now. It's a mess, honestly. I forced a casual tone. Does your mom do any of the bookkeeping? He laughed. Mom. She doesn't even check her credit card statements. Why? Just curious. I smiled, stirring pasta sauce that suddenly smelled too rich. Ethan moved behind me, arms around my waist. You okay? You've been quiet since dinner. I'm fine, I lied. But after he fell asleep that night, I sat on the couch with my laptop, the blue light painting the room in silent confession. I opened the Massachusetts procurement database, publicly accessible, but most people never bother to read the fine print. Vendor lists, payment logs, cross-referenced contractors. It didn't take long to find the first inconsistency, the same vendor listed twice under two tax IDs. C&H Logistics appeared as both a supplier and a donor, impossible under state guidelines. I ran the routing number through an independent audit portal. It linked back to a company registered under C. Hathaway Holdings, Chloe. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. So that's what your consulting job is. Over the next week, I lived a double life. By day, I reviewed clients' quarterly statements, smiled through meetings, drank burnt coffee. By night, I followed paper trails. Every clue led to another. Duplicate invoices, ghost employees, luxury travel labeled as community outreach. I wasn't even angry, not yet. It was something colder than anger. Precision. At the office, my mentor Jordan started noticing. He was in his 50s, the kind of man who measured words like weights. You look like someone solving a murder, he said one afternoon, leaning on my cubicle wall. Maybe I am, I said, eyes still on the screen. He smiled faintly. You've got that forensic look again. Who's the victim this time? Not who, I said quietly. What? Integrity. He studied me a moment longer. If it's real, file it properly, and protect yourself first. That evening, I stared at the anonymous reporting site for over an hour. My cursor hovered above the upload button while the hum of the refrigerator filled the apartment. Part of me wanted to delete everything, forget the drawer, forget the insult, forget that my boyfriend's family was laundering money behind charity paperwork. But then I remembered Diane's bracelet glinting in the chandelier light as she toasted knowing one's place. I clicked submit. The confirmation page flashed for a second, and then it was done. The file, the photos, the trace payments, the documentation disappeared into the system like a secret swallowed by something larger than me. I closed my laptop, hands trembling not with fear, but relief. The next few days felt surreal. Ethan joked at breakfast, kissed me goodbye like nothing was different. But every time he mentioned his parents, my stomach twisted. One night I came home late from the office. Ethan was watching TV, flipping channels without focus. Mom says business is weird lately, he said. Apparently, some auditors asked for paperwork from last quarter. Probably just routine. Probably, I said, keeping my voice steady. He glanced at me. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? I met his eyes. Of course. The lie tasted like copper on my tongue. The following week, the investigation request became public record. Just a small notice preliminary review Hathaway Group financial filings. I saw it before they did. That weekend, Diane posted a photo on social media of a charity banquet wearing the same diamond bracelet. Her caption, "Smug integrity is the foundation of every family business." I almost laughed. The irony was so thick it could have been measured in cubic feet. Sunday morning, I went for a run through the city. It was freezing, the kind of cold that bites through gloves, but it cleared my head. I thought about my father, who'd been an accountant too. He used to say you can tell everything about a person by how they handle money that isn't theirs. He was right. By Monday, the whispers had begun at work. Federal review someone mentioned in the break room, family firm big clients, could shake up half the construction sector. I pretended not to listen, even as my pulse sank to their words. That evening, Ethan came home early. He tossed his keys on the counter, tension visible even in the way he moved. "My dad's furious," he said. "Some random audit notice just showed up. He thinks a competitor reported us." Maybe it's nothing I offered, though my voice felt detached, like an echo. "He keeps saying someone's trying to destroy us. He wants me to ask around." I kept my gaze fixed on the sink. "You think someone could—" He hesitated. "No idea. But if they did, they'll regret it." I turned off the faucet slowly. The sound of dripping water filled the silence between us. That night I lay awake beside him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. He looked peaceful, unaware that his family's empire was already cracking at the foundation. I reached over and traced the outline of his hand with my fingertips, not in affection, but in farewell to the version of him that still believed wealth meant safety. The next morning I received a message from the compliance office at work. "Your submission has been escalated to federal review. Thank you for your contribution." Just like that, it wasn't my secret anymore. On my lunch break, Jordan stopped by my desk again. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Better than before." He studied me for a moment. "Whatever you did, make sure you can live with it." "I can," I said. "I just wish I could have served it warmer." He frowned slightly, not understanding. I didn't explain. That night, as I walked home through the city, snow began to fall, slow, deliberate quiet. It felt like a clean slate. I passed a restaurant window glowing with soft light. Inside, families laughed over dinner plates steaming. Mine had been cold. But the next one would be served differently. At home, I printed one of the receipts I'd photographed and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. A reminder that silence isn't weakness. It's data waiting for context. "They served me leftovers," I whispered, touching the paper edge, "but I'll serve them proof." Then I turned off the light, letting the darkness settle around me, like balance restored, not yet justice, but the beginning of it. Chapter 3. The Family Meeting. The IRS letterhead sat in the middle of the Hathaway study like a loaded gun. When Ethan called that morning, his voice had a ragged edge I'd never heard before. "Can you come by after work? Something's wrong." "There's an audit." "No, not a normal one. It's Federal M." Federal meant the IRS wasn't just sniffing, they'd caught a scent. By the time I pulled through the iron gates at dusk, the estate looked different. The hedges were still geometric and smug, the fountain still whispered money. But the house itself had gone taut and silent, like it understood it was about to be cross-examined. Diane met me at the door with a smile that trembled at the corners. "Emma, sweetheart, thank you for coming on such short notice." I may have been a little harsh at dinner. Stress gets the best of all of us. She said stress the way some people say weather, as if it were a force of nature no one controlled. "It's fine," I said, stepping inside. "Ethan said you needed a second set of eyes." "Just to make sure there are no misunderstandings," she replied quickly, already walking me toward the study. "We've worked with the city for decades. This is clearly a clerical dust-up." She couldn't even say the word mistake. The study looked like triage. Ledgers fanned across the leather-topped desk, a printer hummed angrily in the corner, and someone had gone to war with a highlighter. Robert stood by the window with a cell phone to his ear, speaking low and hard into it. "We're cooperating, Martin. Stop using that word," he jabbed at the air. "No one says fraud in this house." Chloe sat cross-legged on the rug, a calculator in one hand and a glass of white wine in the other. Mascara smudged into a smoky storm around her eyes. They want everything, she muttered, squinting at a spreadsheet. Bank statements, vendor contracts, charitable filings. For 3 years. I glanced at the letter on the desk. That much and more. They can ask for 5, I said. Chloe looked up. Excuse me, 5 years, I repeated. 7 if they suspect substantial understatement. Ethan moved to my side as if proximity could solve any of this. Can you just look? Tell us what they're going to look at. Maybe we can get ahead of it. Robert ended his call and turned jaw-locked. We don't need to get ahead of anything. This is routine. Some pencil pusher trying to justify his job, Dad Ethan said softly. Robert's eyes slid to me, measuring. You're in finance. Good. Maybe you can explain to them what legitimate business looks like. I kept my tone even. Legitimate business looks like clean books. For a beat, no one spoke. Then Diane clapped her hands once too brightly. Tea, coffee. I'm making coffee. Let's stay positive, shall we? No one answered. I stepped to the desk and began with the top stack payroll summaries from the Community Development Division. The columns were clean, neat, and entirely too perfect. Real life leaves smudges. These numbers sang like a choir in lockstep. I traced headcounts with my finger. You reduced staff in January. Chloe leaned back, expression wary. Contractors fluctuate. Seasonal. Yet overtime jumped in Q1. I flipped to the next page. Who approved the variance? Dad handles approval, she said quickly. I reconcile. Her tone said, don't push. I set those sheets aside and reached for the vendor file. C&H Logistics stared up at me like a mirror I'd already looked into. Double entries alternating tax IDs, payments labeled in-kind reimbursements. The paper felt heavier now that it wasn't just what I'd seen in a drawer. It was systematized, defended, printed in bulk. I could have ripped it open, pointed, said everything I'd been swallowing since that dinner. Instead, I picked up a pen and made small notes in the margin, questions worded neutrally like bandages you put on after the cut. Who is the named contact at C&H? I asked. Chloe shrugged without meeting my eyes. A subcontracting coordinator. I don't have their card in front of me. Phone number on Dad's desk somewhere. Diane returned with a tray, china rattling softly. Sugar. Her hands shook as she poured. None for me, thanks. I flipped to charitable filings. The photos stapled to the back showed ribbon cuttings and mayoral smiles. Smiles are cheap. The expense breakdowns, though, those cost something. Hospitality listed under 90% of the events, travel under nearly all of them. The donation in kind line items landed in a narrow band that moved with the company's tax position like a shadow at noon. I circled 3 entries and slid the sheet toward Chloe. You'll need source documents for these. Receipts, invoices, acknowledgments from the nonprofits. The IRS will ask. We have receipts, she said, defensive and brittle. We keep everything. Good, I said. They'll also want to know why the same vendor donated in kind and billed you in cash within a 30-day window. That's legal, Robert snapped from across the room. It can be, I said. It also attracts questions. He stared at me like I'd insulted a blood relative. We build parks and schools. We fix roofs for churches that can't afford repairs. We put people to work. You think that happens for free? No, I said quietly. I think it happens above board. Ethan stepped between us, palms out. Okay, let's dial this down. Em's trying to help. Diane set a cup in front of me with forced grace. We appreciate your notes, but we're not criminals, we're doers. People love to investigate doers. People love to investigate patterns, I said. The room tightened another inch. This was the dance, pretend you're on the same side until someone says the one true thing that can't be unsaid. I turned one more page and found the audit request itself tucked beneath the vendor list. Someone had highlighted phrases as if the ink might soften them. Form 4564 Information Document Request. Names, dates, ranges. There was nothing random about it. The scope was too precise, the questions too prepared. Someone had traced with care and then drawn a circle for everyone to see. Diane's voice dropped to a silk thread. Be honest with us, Emma. Does this look serious? Yes, I said. The thread snapped. Chloe took a gulp of wine, eyes glossy. So what do we do? Fix it. You fix things. That's your thing. Fixing requires accuracy, I said. If you want this to go well, you'll give them everything and you'll do it quickly. Robert barked a laugh without humor. Give the government everything. That's your advice. My advice is don't lie to people whose entire job is catching lies. Diane pressed her fingers to her temples. This is absurd. We've always done things the right way. Mom Ethan said, not unkindly, we've done things our way. She looked at him like she didn't recognize the person speaking. I closed the vendor file. You need counsel, an actual tax attorney, not a friend who did your wills. You need a document hold across all divisions, no shredding, no routine sorting. And you need a single point of contact for the IRS so you don't contradict yourselves by accident. Robert bristled. We're not amateurs. The request says they'll be on site within a week, I continued, ignoring him. Have a conference room ready, make duplicates of everything, and for the love of your own peace, stop emailing about this, pick up the phone, or use counsel. Chloe lowered her glass. Why are you acting like you work for them? I met her eyes. I work for the truth. She smirked. Right. And what are you exactly? A bookkeeper with a savior complex, Chloe Ethan warned. It's okay, I said, rising to my feet. You don't need my opinion. The IRS already has one. Diane's smile flattened into something honest for the first time that night. You must think you're very clever, coming into our home telling us how to run what we built. I don't think I'm clever, I said. I think I'm careful. It's different. Robert moved closer, the desk between us like a narrow strip of neutral ground. Let me be clear, he said softly. Menace wrapped in civility. Families look out for each other. Outsiders stir trouble. Don't be an outsider, Emma. That ship sailed at dinner, I replied. Ethan flinched. His eyes met mine, pleading for me to soften this into something smooth and fixable. We used to be good at that, sanding down the sharp parts until only habit remained. I couldn't tell if he wanted me to save them or save him from what my answer would mean. I slid my pen into my purse and took one step back. You asked for help. I gave it. The rest is on you. Diane's laugh was quiet and mean. You'll never be one of us. The words didn't stab. They landed like a diagnosis I'd already received. I looked at Chloe, at the wine, at the pride that had hardened into panic, and then at the letter with the seal no one in this room could outspend. No, I said, and thank God for that. I reached for the door, then paused. When they come, don't try to charm them. Don't explain how much good you do. Don't say, we've always done it this way. Answer what they ask, only what they ask, and if you don't know, say you don't know. Anything else will read as theater. Diane's mouth twitched. You really enjoy this, don't you? The moral high ground. Enjoyment wasn't the word. There was relief, yes, the kind you feel when a splinter finally works itself free. There was sadness, too, but the healthy kind, the kind that means you stopped pretending something broken was whole. I enjoy clean ledgers, I said. They sleep better than I do. I stepped into the hallway and nearly collided with their housekeeper, a woman in her 50s clutching a stack of folded linens. She murmured sorry and moved past me into the study. For a moment, I pictured Diane's line from that first dinner, the help comes in the morning, and tasted the same cold slice of contempt. Then I imagined that woman being marched into a room by an agent who spoke in polite questions and wrote in permanent ink. Someone always pays for the stories rich people tell themselves. It's almost never the rich. In the foyer, Ethan caught my wrist. Wait, please. The old softness was back, the one I used to trust. Tell me what to do. Tell me the one right thing so I can do it. For a second, I wanted to take his hand and drag him into a future where none of this had happened, where his mother had served hot food and respect, where there were no drawers full of receipts, where we were two people building something you could show to the light without shame. But that future died in a kitchen with lemon-polished counters. You tell your father to hire counsel, I said. You tell your sister to stop touching the books. You tell your mother this isn't about humiliation, it's about compliance. And then you step back and let the process be the villain so no one hates you for telling the truth. He blinked, absorbing it. And you, I'll go home. His grip loosened. Did you? Were you the one who I held his gaze? Does it matter? He swallowed. It does to me. It shouldn't, I said. Right and wrong don't change depending on where you sit at dinner. He let go of my wrist and shoved his hands into his pockets the way boys do when they realize there isn't a version of the story where they get to be both loyal and good. I thought you loved me. I do, I said. I love you enough to want you to be better than this. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even a hope. It was a statement of fact, one more number in a column that would eventually balance whether anyone liked the total or not. Outside, the night had moved from blue to black. I walked down the steps and felt the house watching me from its perfect windows, a thing built on angles and old stories. When I closed my car door, my phone buzzed an email from the compliance office. On-site start date confirmed. Please prepare to present findings to council Thursday. I sat there for a long minute, hands loose on the steering wheel, listening to the small ticking sounds engines make when heat leaves them. In the rear view, the mansion glowed like a ship, anchored stubbornly in shallow water. You can't want depth into existence. You dig for it, and if you won't, the ground collapses eventually and teaches you what you refuse to learn. On impulse, I reached into my purse and took out a small, sticky note. I wrote 2 lines and stuck it to the dash. Give them facts, not feelings. Silence is not weakness. It's evidence, waiting its turn. When I finally pulled away, the gate opened with mechanical obedience and swung shut behind me with a sigh. I drove in silence. No music, just the sound of tires on cold road and the ache of something ending cleanly. Back in my apartment, I pinned the audit request printout to the corkboard next to the photocopied receipt. The 2 sheets hung side by side like cause and effect, dinner and dessert, insult and consequence. I turned off the kitchen light and the papers became pale ghosts in the dark, the kind that don't haunt so much as keep you company when you decide you'd rather tell the truth than be invited back for second helpings. The IRS letterhead sat on my wall like a loaded gun. And in a few days, someone else would pull the trigger. Chapter 4. The Audit. The courthouse smelled like rain and polished marble. April in Massachusetts had that kind of cold that slipped under your collar and reminded you the world still had seasons even when your heart didn't. I paused at the front steps, rain dripping from the hem of my coat, and drew a long breath. I hadn't told Ethan I'd been reassigned internally. The moment I filed the conflict of interest disclosure, I knew what it meant. The department trusted me to handle cases involving personal proximity, and Hathaway Group fit that description perfectly. I didn't choose this case. It found me. Inside the courtroom, buzzed with low conversation lawyers, assistants, reporters, pretending not to care. At the far table, the Hathaways sat lined up like a portrait gone wrong. Robert's hands were clenched on the table knuckles, pale. Diane's pearls gleamed sharp as teeth against her throat. Chloe kept her eyes fixed on her phone, scrolling as if she could swipe away reality. And Ethan, he looked the way someone does when they've run out of excuses but haven't yet found repentance. The clerk called the session to order. Case 14-782, Hathaway Group versus State Revenue Division. The prosecutor leaned toward me. Ms. Carter, ready? I nodded, opening the binder I'd built over months of quiet, patient work. Every tab, every page, every timestamp had been reviewed until the paper itself seemed to breathe. The judge entered, robe-flowing gavel sharp against the wood. Proceed. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the state calls Ms. Emma Carter, lead forensic accountant for the Department of Revenue. My heels clicked softly as I walked to the witness stand. Ethan's head turned. He blinked once, twice disbelief first, then something that looked dangerously like betrayal. When our eyes met, I almost faltered. Almost. I swore in, took my seat, adjusted the microphone. The silence stretched thin. Diane whispered to Robert, she can't. But the judge's gavel silenced her. The prosecutor smiled politely. Ms. Carter, you were assigned to investigate financial irregularities involving the Hathaway Group. Correct? Yes. Would you summarize your findings for the court? I glanced at the screen behind me. Of course. The lights dimmed slightly as the projector came to life. Slide by slide, the numbers appeared dates, routing codes, identical vendor IDs under different corporate entities. This, I said, pointing to the first, represents duplicate payments made within 30 days. The same invoice number was used twice, once through the official account and again through a subsidiary called C&H Logistics. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Robert's lawyer jumped up. Objection, this information was obtained under questionable. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. Proceed. I advanced to the next slide. These transactions coincide with charitable deductions claimed by the company during the same quarter. The donations, when traced, led back to accounts controlled by Ms. Chloe Hathaway. Chloe's head snapped up. That's a lie, I didn't look at her. Each transaction has an originating IP address. All were from the same home router. Robert slammed his palm against the table. This is outrageous. She's doing this out of spite. The judge's gavel struck once hard. Order. I waited. When the room quieted, I said simply, "Numbers don't have feelings, Mr. Hathaway. They only tell the truth you tried to hide." Ethan flinched as if I'd struck him, though the words weren't for him. The prosecutor continued, "Ms. Carter, did you uncover any evidence of deliberate falsification?" Yes. Multiple instances, including this. I switched slides the photo from Diane's kitchen drawer. Receipts stacked neatly beside cutlery handwriting and blue ink, routing numbers circled. Diane gasped. "That's from my home." I met her eyes for the first time. "It's from your company's home." For a moment, the room was soundless, and then came the stillness, that fragile second before reality breaks. I felt it as surely as a pressure change in the air. Ethan rose halfway to his feet. "Emma, you reported us." The softness in his voice made it worse. "I reported a crime," I said quietly. "The facts did the rest." His expression shifted, confusion giving way to comprehension, then shame. He sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the table. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Based on Ms. Carter's documentation, the department requests an immediate freeze on the Hathaway Group's assets, pending further investigation." Robert's attorney sputtered. "Your Honor, this is excessive. There's no evidence of intent." The judge interrupted. "Mr. Hathaway admitted to duplications under oath this morning. The court considers intent established. Motion granted." The gavel came down like a closing door. Diane let out a small, strangled sound, not quite a cry, more like disbelief pressed into human shape. Chloe covered her face with her hands. Robert swore under his breath. I packed my files methodically, the way I'd done 1,000 times before. But when I looked up, Ethan was still watching me. His eyes were red, jaw tight. "You ruined them," he said softly, barely audible. "No," I said. "They ruined themselves. I just wrote it down." He looked as if he wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to defend. I stood, thanked the court, and stepped down from the stand. As I walked past their table, Diane's perfume-sharp floral suffocating filled my lungs. She whispered, "I hope you're proud." "I'm at peace," I said, and kept walking. Outside, rain had started again, a fine mist turning the courthouse steps slick and reflective. The world smelled of wet concrete and thunder. I stopped under the awning, breathing in the chill. The sound of the rain was almost kind, steady, impartial cleansing. Ethan followed me out. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. "Emma, wait." I turned. His suit jacket was damp, his tie crooked. For the first time, he didn't look like a Hathaway. He looked like a man stripped of the illusions that once cushioned him. "I didn't know," he said, voice shaking. "I swear to God, I didn't know." "I believe you." "Then why?" "Because believing you doesn't erase what's true." He swallowed, searching for words that didn't exist. "You could have warned me." "I tried," I said. "You just didn't want to listen." The rain picked up tapping against the concrete like applause no one wanted to hear. "I thought you loved me," he said finally. I did. My voice was steady, not cold. But love doesn't mean covering up crime. It means wanting someone to be better than the lies they inherit. He took a step closer. "So that's it?" I nodded. "That's it." He stared at me for a long time, then looked toward the street where their driver waited. When he finally walked away, his shoulders slumped under the weight of a legacy he couldn't carry anymore. I watched him disappear into the rain until the black car turned the corner and was gone. For the first time in months, I exhaled without guilt. The prosecutor came up beside me, umbrella in hand. "Good work in there," he said. "Clean, concise. You make it look easy." "It's never easy," I replied. "Just necessary." He nodded, offered me the umbrella. I declined. As he left, I stayed where I was, letting the rain wash the courthouse dust from my coat. Somewhere inside, the judge would be signing orders, clerks filing motions, lawyers preparing statements. Justice moved slowly, but it moved. And that was enough. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking through puddles. The clouds had split open into streaks of silver light, a fragile truce between storm and calm. People think revenge is a fire, a roar, a declaration, but the truth is quieter. It's the click of a pen signing a report, the shuffle of papers in evidence boxes, the whisper of rain on courthouse stone. That night when I got home, I hung my coat, boiled tea, and placed my court badge on the kitchen counter. Beside it sat the photocopied receipt, the same one from Diane's drawer. I didn't frame it. I didn't need to. I stood by the window watching headlights smear across the wet street. My reflection looked older somehow, but steadier, like someone who'd stopped apologizing for knowing the difference between mercy and accountability. The rain eased to a drizzle. I whispered to no one and everyone. They served me leftovers to remind me of my place. I served them receipts to remind them of theirs. And for the first time, the balance felt perfect. Chapter 5. Receipts and Redemption. It's strange the silence that follows justice. People expect thunder applause, a curtain call. But when the storm finally ends, all that's left is quiet, the kind that fills the spaces where fear used to live. 3 months after the hearing, the Hathaway mansion went dark. The glossy banners that once read Hathaway Group, Building the Future, were taken down, the company logo stripped from its office doors. The papers called it a financial reckoning. I called it math. Robert's contractor license was revoked. Diane accepted a plea deal, probation fines, a forced resignation from her charity board. Chloe's so-called consulting firm vanished overnight, the website replaced by a blank page reading "Under Reconstruction." And Ethan, he moved out of the city, no forwarding address, just a voicemail that said, "I need to start over somewhere no one knows my last name." I didn't respond. Some things don't need replies, they need distance. Meanwhile, my life kept moving. The department recognized my work quietly, a commendation, a small plaque, and a promotion. I became lead forensic analyst, heading a team of auditors who still thought ethics was something that lived in a textbook until they saw what greed did to real people. The office had a window view now. Downtown Boston looked different from above, less glamorous, more grid lines and possibility. Every day I walked in with a calm I hadn't known before, the kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing even when it hurt. Jordan stopped by my new office one afternoon, leaning on the doorway with that patient half-smile of his. "Big desk suits you," he said. "It's just furniture," I replied. "Sure," he said. "So is a witness stand." I laughed softly. "You read the transcripts?" He nodded. "Twice. You handled it clean." Not many people could stay that calm in front of someone they loved. I looked down at my hands, steady now, not trembling. Calm isn't absence of feeling, it's control of it. He studied me for a moment, then smiled. "Keep that. It'll take you far." After he left, I stared out at the skyline. The clouds drifted low and slow, the way time does when you stop trying to measure it. I realized I hadn't thought about the Hathaways in days. That was its own kind of victory. Still, reminders came in small ways. One evening, I stopped by a steakhouse after work, the kind with low lighting and old jazz humming through hidden speakers. The waiter asked for my order, pen poised. "Steak," I said. "Hot." As the plate arrived, the smell hit first butter garlic, something rich and alive. It was such a simple thing, a hot meal, but it carried weight. I cut the first bite slowly, savoring it. At the next table, a family of 4 laughed over dessert. Their joy sounded effortless. I didn't envy them. I just listened quietly, grateful that life could still sound that soft after everything. I thought of that first dinner, the cold plate, the polished cruelty, the way silence had burned more than words. And I realized something: humiliation only lasts as long as you let someone else define your worth. When I finished, the waiter asked if I wanted dessert. "No," I said, smiling. This was enough. Outside, the city lights reflected in puddles like fractured stars. The night air smelled of rain and new beginnings. A week later, an envelope arrived at my office: cream cardstock, gold seal, Integrity and Action Award, the kind of internal recognition they usually give to people who retire quietly. But this one had a note from the commissioner, for reminding us that integrity isn't just a policy, it's proof. I didn't frame it, I tucked it in a drawer instead. Achievements are for others to see, peace is for yourself. Sometimes, though, peace has a strange sense of humor. 2 months later, I was invited to speak at a seminar for young forensic accountants, the topic: handling ethical conflicts in high-stakes investigations. Standing at the podium, I looked at the faces in the crowd, wide-eyed, nervous, idealistic. They reminded me of who I was before I learned how easily decency bends under pressure. "Here's what no textbook tells you," I began. "Truth doesn't shout. It waits. It's patient. It lets people bury themselves under the weight of their own numbers." Someone asked if I ever felt guilty for what happened to the families I investigated. "Yes," I said honestly, "every time." But guilt isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's just proof you still have a conscience. The real danger is when you stop feeling it. Afterward, a young woman approached me. Her name was Leah, barely 25, nerves visible in her shaking hands. "My fiancé's family owns a business," she said quietly. "I found out they've been hiding assets offshore. I don't know what to do." I studied her, the tremor in her voice, the fear I once knew so well. "You already do," I said. "You just want someone to tell you you're not crazy for doing it." She nodded, eyes bright with tears. "Then listen," I said softly. "Do what's right, not what's easy. One day you'll look back and realize that's the day your real life began." Later that night, as I walked to my car, the city buzzed with quiet energy trains, humming streetlights, flickering people carrying small versions of their own battles. It made me feel strangely connected to everything and nothing at once. Back home, my apartment had changed since the early days, brighter, warmer. On one wall hung my father's framed photo, beside it a corkboard with notes from old cases. At the very top, pinned neatly in the center, was that same photocopied receipt, the one I'd taken from Diane's drawer. The ink had faded slightly, the paper curling at the edges, but it stayed there like a heartbeat between memory and meaning. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at it before bed, not out of spite, but gratitude. It reminded me of who I became when someone underestimated me. People think revenge is fire, but real revenge isn't burning what hurt you, it's building something they can't touch. A few weeks later, as spring softened the city, I got an email from a journalist I used to admire. "Would you consider commenting on the Hathaway case for a feature on women in finance?" I hovered over the reply box for a long time, then typed just one sentence: "Justice isn't about payback. It's about proof." Then I hit send, closed my laptop, and stepped out onto the balcony. The air smelled faintly of lilacs. Somewhere below, laughter rose from the cafe across the street. Life, messy, unpredictable, beautiful, went on. I leaned against the railing, watching the city pulse with light. For the first time, I didn't think about revenge or redemption. I thought about balance, not the kind that lives in spreadsheets, but the kind you feel when your heart finally stops arguing with itself. I whispered the words that had carried me from humiliation to peace. They served me leftovers to remind me of my place. I served them receipts to remind them of theirs. A pause. Then quietly the last line. Because revenge doesn't always roar, sometimes it audits, proof not rage.